Conversation early today, especially for the monologue. Joe Biden, Zelensky gave their speeches at the UN. Let's go further into that conversation. We're joined with Ron Aledo. He's a former CIA contractor, former Joint Staff Intelligence Officer at the Pentagon. Ron, welcome to the show. By the way, am I pronouncing your last name correct? Aledo?
Yeah, that's correct. And thank you very much for the invitation.
Oh, man, thank you for joining us. Give me your just overall take of Joe Biden's speech. I'm just curious of your framing, just to get an idea of your thinking about what that speech was like, and for that matter, also Zelensky's.
He talked about many issues, obviously. He talked about artificial intelligence and how his policies are policies of the good neighbor, and he wants everybody to do well around the world, et cetera, et cetera. But then obviously he went back to his talking points, his administration talking points, PSYOP, propaganda talking points about the Ukraine war, and that basically that he wants to keep supporting Ukraine, whatever it takes. That's has been his talking point. Whatever it takes to what, he never defined it. He said that he wants just peace, but just peace means a complete and total defeat of the Russian military. That will never, ever happen. Obviously, he did not talk at all about the other talking points that the Russian government has expressed, and many experts like Colonel Douglas McGregor has expressed during the last year. The Colonel, U.S. Army Colonel and Virginia Senator Richard Black has expressed during the last year. Tucker Carlson has expressed during the last year. He did not talk about any of those issues, how this war is an existential threat to Russia, to the Russian security. They cannot allow, never, ever arm, puppet Ukrainian government, armed government, NATO member, puppet government of NATO in the Russian border. That's an existential threat to Russia, just like the Soviet missiles in Cuba were an existential threat to the United States in 1962.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Because oftentimes, like I pointed out in the monologue, Joe Biden has a lot of lapses in his memory about the events that have basically taken place, whether it was the Minsk agreements, whether it was the negotiation that they were trying to do within the first few months of the war. I want to play this clip. This is Joe Biden basically bringing up the Ukraine-Russia war, and I want to get your take on what Joe Biden is saying here. Let's play the clip.
As we evolve our institutions and drive creative new partnerships, let me be clear. Certain principles of our international system are sacrosanct. Sovereignty, territorial integrity, human rights. These are the core tenets of the UN Charter, the pillars for peaceful relations among nations, without which we cannot achieve any of our goals. That has not changed, and that must not change. Yet, for the second year in a row, this gathering, dedicated to peaceful resolution of conflicts, is darkened by the shadow of war. An illegal war of conquest brought without provocation by Russia against its neighbor Ukraine. Like every nation in the world, the United States wants this war to end. No nation wants this war to end more than Ukraine. And we strongly support Ukraine in its efforts to bring about a diplomatic resolution that delivers just and lasting peace. But Russia alone bears responsibility for this war. Russia alone has the power to end this war immediately. And it's Russia alone that stands in the way of peace, because Russia's price for peace is Ukraine's capitulation, Ukraine's territory, and Ukraine's children. Russia believes that the world will grow weary and allow it to brutalize Ukraine without consequence. But I ask you this: if we abandon the core principles of the United States to appease an aggressor, can any member state in this body feel confident that they are protected? If you allow Ukraine to be carved up, is the independence of any nation secure? I'd respectfully suggest the answer is no. We have to stand up to this naked aggression today and deter other would-be aggressors tomorrow. That's why the United States, together with our allies and partners around the world, will continue to stand with the brave people of Ukraine as they defend their sovereignty and territorial integrity and their freedom.
Ron, this is pretty astonishing coming out of a president or a country that went through Afghanistan, that went through Iraq, that was responsible for the overthrow of the democratically elected government of Ukraine, the very country that he's basically talking about. Give me your take on this, I guess, rhetoric from the standpoint of Joe Biden.
Yeah, these are his talking points, the talking points that he disseminates via the Pentagon, the Department of State, the White House spokesperson. I mean, these are the propaganda talking points, but they don't reflect at all the reality. Just like Professor John Mesheimer has said many, many times, this war began, as you said, in February of 2014. People doesn't realize that Russia signed a peace agreement, an economic agreement, commercial agreement, that is actually a peace agreement with Ukraine in December of 2013. In December of 2013, the presidents of Russia and presidents of Ukraine, they signed this peace agreement and economic agreement where Russia will to give billions of dollars in economic aid to Ukraine and reduce gas prices and obviously establishing de facto peace for many, many years to come. But that peace agreement that Russia signed with Ukraine in December of 2013 only lasted 2 months because Obama, Biden, vice president, they sent Victoria Nuland to Ukraine to organize this coup, this insurgency. The Democrats like to talk about the insurgents of January 6th, but a real insurgency is what the United States did in Ukraine in February of 2014, where they organized, financed, coordinated this illegal coup. So that is the origin of this war. He talks about the brave Ukrainian people. What Ukrainian people he's talking about? Because there are two Ukrainian peoples in Ukraine, two different concepts of what Ukraine is. Ukraine means borderlands. If you ask the people of the northwest of Ukraine that are mostly Polish descent, Hungarian descent, of the former Galicia, member of a part of the Austro-Hungary Empire, that people, Ukraine is part of the West, should be part of the European Union, should be linked to Poland. Remember, there are hundreds of thousands of people in the northwest of Ukraine that believe themselves to be Polish, of Polish heritage. So they have nothing to do with Russia, or they don't like Russia at all. But if you go to the south and east of Ukraine, it's a completely different animal. You see over there millions of Ukrainians that see themselves as Russians, that believe that Ukraine is part of Russia. They speak Russian as the first language, and they believe that Novorossiya, the east and the south of Ukraine, is part of this mythical all the Russians, and they belong to the Russian Orthodox Church. They are loyal to the Patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church in Moscow. So it's a completely different Ukrainian. They have the same passport, yes, the people of the east and the south and the people of the north and the west, but their vision and concept of Ukraine and what Ukraine is absolutely 100% 180 degrees opposite and contrary one to other. He doesn't mention the coup. He didn't mention the aspirations of the people of the south and the east of Ukraine to be linked politically, culturally with Russia. He didn't mention that this war is not only Russia who started. Again, that this war began in 2014, in February of 2014, and it was Boris Johnson who went to Ukraine a few months after the war began in 2022 and persuade Zelensky to keep fighting. They were about to do a peace process, Russia and Ukraine. Remember, there were negotiations that started immediately after the war began in 2022. And those negotiations were taking place at the Belarusian-Ukrainian border. And they were close to reach an agreement. And then immediately Boris Johnson from the UK flew to Kiev, talked to Zelensky, and persuaded, do not sign any peace agreement. Keep fighting. We will keep supporting you, giving you hundreds of billions of dollars so you can keep doing the war. So it's not up to Russia only to fight to end this war. It's also up to the West. Because if the West cut the funds, just like a couple of Republican candidates have said that they will do, this war will end immediately. So you need to be fair, and you need to check, a reality check and fact check all the propaganda points that Biden is saying with the reality on the ground and the history on the ground.
And you know what, Ron? So one of the things that we've constantly talked about here, and you actually just mentioned that, and just this whole propaganda arm, what's happening here. And just like Biden was saying in his answer, as he was talking about Ukraine, not allowing Ukraine to be carved up, and and asking this question about whether or not any nation is really secure, the Washington Post, in covering the speech, they reference and I'll say the Kremlin has hinted at the use of nuclear weapons repeatedly during the current hostilities. And we've talked about this here many times before. What they're referring to are comments that Putin made, and essentially what he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, he said something like, we'll do whatever it takes. Well, I'm paraphrasing, but it is the statement when he made the statement, you had Zelensky, you had administration officials, you had many people out there talking about nuclear war. And nothing in the actual statement from Putin referenced nuclear armaments at all, yet the narrative is that he was threatening nuclear war. Now, his statement, will do whatever it takes to protect our homeland. Let's just say that. It is a statement that would mirror what the United States would say and any other country in the world would say if they feel as if their sovereignty is threatened. What do you make of how the media, and even though they're kind of twisting themselves into pretzels, trying not to be critical of what's happening on the battlefield, what do you make of how the media has fueled this time and time again with so many things that what I think it was just the other week, Jamal, we were talking about, they were blaming Russia for, was it the market?
The Donetsk market.
Yeah,
19 civilians that were basically killed when the missile landed September 6th, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. So recently, but what do you make of how the media has been pushing this, what I consider a propaganda piece with this war? What are your thoughts on that? Media's aim.
The media obviously is the arm of the propaganda arm of not only the U.S. government, of all governments. They use the media to pass the message, and the way that the United States and many governments do is that they pass talking points to the media every morning. The government public affairs officers, they pass these talking points to the media at the Pentagon, at the White House, at the State Department, and they expect the media just to repeat, just like to parrot those talking points without any critical thinking at all, without any analysis at all, without any fact check at all. So whatever the propaganda person at the Pentagon feeds the media every morning with a cable to all the media that is over there represented, they expect, and actually they do, all the media just repeat and parrot these talking points automatically without any critical thinking at all. That is how this works. And obviously, we can see that 90% of the media in the United States, for example, is just parroting whatever Biden says. Both from the center-right, Fox News, for example, and from the center-left, like CNN, for example, the New York Times. They all have these globalist, neocon, warmongering vision that comes from the Cold War. But obviously, it doesn't matter if they are Republicans or Democrats, they parrot the same talking point without any critical analysis. The Republicans, they parrot it because they think that Russia today is still the Soviet Union of yesterday. They believe that the Cold War is still there. They believe that Russia is this evil empire, communist evil empire. They don't see that the Soviet Union, just like Mike Pence, ridiculous said in the presidential debate, the communist, the Soviet Union. And it has to be Ramaswamy who said, no, the Soviet Union disappeared. The Soviet Union is not there anymore. Now, and that's what the neocons, warmonger from the Republican Party, don't understand. Now Russia is a Christian country. It's not a communist Marxist country anymore. It's a different thing, completely different country. The Warsaw Pact is not there. On the other side, the Democrats, obviously, they parrot the talking points of their president. So either if you're center-right or center-left, you parrot the same talking point that comes out of complete ignorance of the fact and the history of this conflict. Now, there is a small percentage in the Republican Party, I will say no more than 10, 15%, that are the most with the libertarian viewpoint of Ron Paul, now Ramaswamy, even President Trump too, that libertarian 10%, 15% represented, that was basically represented by Tucker Carlson and his show, that is against the war because of fiscal conservative reason, because they don't want to get into other people's war, because they know this is a proxy war that can end up very bad for the war. So they are the only people who oppose that. Also, there is a small percentage on the extreme left that perhaps is also an opponent of the war. But 90%, I would say 85% of the media and 85% of the political views in the United States blindly and from the point of ignorance support this war. Now, about the nuclear threat, I believe it's real. I believe it's real. And not because Russia wants to engage in any nuclear war with the United States or NATO. Obviously, that will be the end of the war. That will be the mutual assured destruction of that we were fearing during the Cold War between the Soviet Union and the United States up to the 90s, up to the Cold War. But I do believe, and many experts believe, like Colonel Douglas McGregor and Colonel Richard Black, they also believe that this is an existential threat to Russia. That's the difference between this conflict and Afghanistan for the Soviet Union, or this conflict and Afghanistan for the United States, and this conflict and the United States and Vietnam, for example. Okay, we are going to try. If it's too expensive, if it's too problematic, we're having a lot of casualties, okay, we pack and we go home. That's what the United States did in Vietnam. That's what the United States did in Afghanistan. This is too expensive, it's problematic, there is no end on site, let's go home. Let's go to pack and go home. No, this is not this case. This is the catch-22 that the neocons globalists do not see. This is an existential threat to Russia. It's not like Vietnam for the United States. It's not like Afghanistan for the United States. If things go good, I go well, I stay. If things go bad, I go home. No, Russia has to stay. The survival of the state, of the survival of Putin as president, is here. After all this money, after all this life lost, after all this expenditure, after all this effort, he cannot say, okay, this is still difficult, let's go back and go home. Furthermore, after he annexed these 4 regions in Ukraine, furthermore, after he annexed the Donbas region and the Russian-speaking regions of the South and East, this is an existential threat. And this is what I mean that the nuclear threat is real. Russia has to win this conflict. It cannot lose it. If it takes for Russia to declare war, to win, declare formal war, and mobilize 2-3 million soldiers, Russia will do it. If it takes for Russia to win this conflict to deploy tactical small nuclear weapons, small nuclear weapons with a radius of 1 kilometer, Russia will do that. Russia is trying not to do that. Russia is avoiding to do that. It's trying to win this from a conventional military viewpoint, using conventional military tools. But let's suppose that for whatever reason the United States gives $300 billion to Ukraine, and Ukraine can, for whatever miraculous reason, defeat militarily the conventional forces of Russia and go into Crimea. At that point, without any doubt, I'm sure that Russia will escalate. Russia can only go forward. It cannot go backward. Russia will most likely at that point use tactical small nuclear weapons and annihilate in 2 days the Ukrainian army with those tactical small nuclear weapons. Now, the question is, why will the United States do that? Because we have talking points of Petraeus, for example. The White House is sending Petraeus to send these talking points from an unofficial way, not from the official spokesperson of the White House or the State Department, but are sending Petraeus to talk these talking points unofficially. And Petraeus said, if Russia used tactical nuclear weapons, then we will destroy the Russian military. We will go into war. We will be seeing the Black Sea Fleet. What that means? That means that then the war will escalate into a world war. Because if the United States or NATO intervenes directly in any way or form into this war, Russia then will declare war. And let's face it, the conventional military of Russia is far inferior of the conventional military forces of the United States and NATO. They have a 5-to-1 advantage on conventional military forces. So if there is any war declared between Russia and the United States, Russia and NATO, this war immediately, within a matter of weeks, will escalate to the worst nightmare ever, that is nuclear war, nuclear Armageddon, mutual assured destruction. We're talking about hundreds of people, of millions of people dead within days. We're talking about 5 billion people starving to death within months due to the nuclear winter. So that is what we need to see. We need to see that there is the tactical nuclear threat that I think is on the table. If for whatever reason Russia is defeated in the battlefield with their conventional weapons, Russia will escalate to the tactical small nuclear weapons to win the war. And if the United States intervene directly or NATO intervenes directly, I think that this war will escalate to the worst case scenario, the worst nightmare ever of humankind, that is mutual assured destruction. Now, that is the catch-22 that the neocons cannot see. The brainless people in Washington, D.C., in London, in Paris, in Brussels cannot see. They are in an impossible catch-22. They want to supply weapons to Ukraine, billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars in weapons to Ukraine, so Ukraine can defeat Russia in the battlefield. But if Ukraine defeats Russia in the battlefield, then Russia will use tactical small nuclear weapons and annihilate the Ukrainian military in a couple of days. So it's an impossible catch-22 that the neocon globalists cannot see.
Man, Ron, this is why I say Joe Biden is the worst president we've ever had. And a lot of it has to do with these type of quagmires. Because you're right. I said early on, this was an existential crisis from the standpoint of Russia. It's the integrity of the state. And like you said, this is no different than the Cuban Missile Crisis, where you have something that is taking place on your border, where the state itself is under this kind of war of choice, in the way that Colonel McGregor would say. I mean, Joe Biden keeps using this line for as long as it takes. How far does he go? Meaning, Obama, part of the reason that Obama said he wouldn't give offensive weapons to Ukraine had to do with, whether he gave them or not, I don't know. But part of the reason was Russia always has escalatory dominance, meaning this is their backyard. This is right there on their border. This is where they are. They can't go anywhere in this particular situation. They're stuck defending this particular area and fighting for the integrity of the state. How far do you think Biden is willing to push this?
No, and again, this is part of the impossible catch-22 where Biden and the neocons and the globalists are. Okay, they are an impossible catch-22. They want to give weapons to Ukraine so Ukraine can win, but the most chances that the weapons they give to Ukraine and the most Russian soldiers they kill and the most close Ukraine is to win, the most close Russia is to use tactical small nuclear weapons and destroy and annihilate the Ukrainian army. So that is an impossible catch-22. People have to understand that, this is not like Vietnam to the United States. If it goes well, we stay. If it goes bad, we go back home. Or this is not Afghanistan to the United States. If this goes well, we stay. If this goes bad, we go back home. This is an existential threat, just like the Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba were to the United States in 1962 an existential threat. We need to understand something. People have to understand geography and history.
I guess what I'm getting at is, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Ukraine has a very large, long border with Russia. That border leads to the industrial heart of Russia, the oil heart of Russia, the food basket of Russia, to Volgograd and to the Caucasus. The Germans knew that in World War II. That's why they desperately tried to take the city of Stalingrad, today Volgograd, because they knew that if they take the oil of the Soviet Union, if they will take that area, the Caucasus, the food basket, the oil heart of the Soviet Union, they will defeat the Soviet Union. They will give a mortal blow to the heart of the Soviet Union. That's why the famous Stalingrad battle of 1942 and 1943. The Germans tried in desperation to take Stalingrad, today Volgograd, and the region and the area. That's why NATO and the United States is so obsessed with bringing Ukraine into as a puppet proxy state, because they know that in any war, a NATO member Ukraine with U.S. soldiers on the border, with Polish soldiers on the border, German troops in the border, French troops in the border, British troops in the border, they can go into Volgograd, take the Caucasus, and basically give a mortal blow to Russia. And that's why this is an existential threat to Russia. Russia can never, ever allow that. How far is Biden going? Listen, if you see the analysis of what the Biden administration is doing, you can see that they have hidden motives in this war. It's not only making the victory of Ukraine. That's BS. That's talking point. You have seen during the last year and a half that Biden has given incremental assistance to Ukraine. He began with the very basics. Then he escalated. He escalated with artillery, with HIMARS. He escalated with long-range missiles. Now we're talking about F-16. Now we're talking about the tanks, the M1 Abrams tanks. So it's escalated. He's giving to Ukraine billions and billions and hundreds of billions of dollars, but not enough to defeat Russia. People have to understand that from the military viewpoint. Just enough to keep Ukraine on the fight. Just enough. And when things are getting real bad, then he increments a little bit more. And when things get a little bit bad for Ukraine, then a little bit more. So you need to understand that from the strategic viewpoint that Biden has some ulterior motives here. His administration of his puppets, basically the puppeteers of Biden, whoever governs the United States for real and manages Biden, his handlers, they have ulterior motives. They do not want Ukraine to actually win the war. You analyze the amount and the specific military aid that they give. They just want Ukraine to keep going. They want to bleed slow motion the Russian military. They want to bleed slow motion Russian soldiers. They want to bleed slow motion the destruction of Russian military equipment, slow motion, long term. But they are not really interested, according to the military they are giving, in a fast, quick, total victory of Ukraine, regardless of the propaganda and the talking points they say. And this is another catch-22. The most the Russian military bleeds, the most the Russian military equipment gets destroyed, the stronger it's getting, because the Russian factories are working 24/7. The Russian army is adding 25,000 soldiers every month by conscript and by volunteers and by recruiting a lot of people and professional army. They are getting stronger. The Russian army is revolutionizing the military. They are increasing the drones. They are changing the doctrine of the Air Force. Before, it used to be only an air-to-air combat tool. Now it's an air-to-land combat tool. So this also is backfiring. They want to make Russian military weaker in the long term, but actually is doing the contrary. In 1 year from now, Russia is going to have far over 1.5 million soldiers with brand new Armata tanks, brand new T-90 tanks, a brand new drone force, brand new modernized Air Force. So even in that strategic goal, the United States is also failing.
Wow. Ron, man, really appreciate you joining us. I think this was your first time with us, and I really do appreciate you joining us. Definitely come back. Ron Aledo, he's a former CIA contractor, former Joint Staff Intelligence Officer at the Pentagon. Look, we're going to take your calls. The number is 202-521-1320. That's 202-521-1320. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back.